Do you remember the lighting department? Rows upon rows of glowing chandeliers hanging from the ceiling like frozen fireworks? Crystal droplets catching the fluorescent light above? You were 8 years old, maybe 10. Mum had you by the hand, and you were walking through British home stores on a Saturday afternoon. The smell of the cafe drifting across from somewhere near the back, chips frying, eggs sizzling on a hot plate, weak tea brewing in industrial urns, your feet squeaking on polished floors as you passed rails of sensible cardigans and stacks of folded towels. This was shopping. This was family. This was Britain. And somewhere between the boardroom and the final clearance sale, everything that made it special was stripped away and sold for a single pound. Welcome back to the channel. If you grew up with memories like these, then you are exactly who this story is for. Hit that subscribe button and drop your own BHS memories in the comments below. I want to hear about your Saturday shopping trips and your school uniform fittings and that cafe meal that tasted better than any restaurant. Now let us find out how British home stores lost its heart. In 1928, a group of American entrepreneurs opened a shop in Brixton. They had watched Woolworths conquer the British high street with its nothing over sixpence promise, and they wanted a piece of that action. But they were clever enough not to compete directly. British Home Store set its ceiling at 1 shilling, double the price, double the ambition. Within a year, they had raised it to 5 shillings to stock better homeware, better drapery, better everything. The name itself was a masterstroke. British Home Stores. In an era when buying British meant something, when patriotism was stitched into the fabric of everyday commerce. The company claimed 96% of its goods were manufactured right here on these islands. By 1933, the business had gone public. Stores were spreading across London suburbs, Croydon, Harlesden, Ilford. Each one featured something unusual for the time. A small cafeteria where shoppers could sit down and rest their feet, eat a hot meal, make a day of it. This was not just retail. This was an experience. And it was aimed squarely at ordinary British families who wanted quality without pretension and value without embarrassment. The company developed its own brands: Twinkle for babies and infants, Travers for luggage, Request for groceries. These were not fancy labels. They were promises. You knew what you were getting when you saw that name on the tag. By the end of the 1960s, BHS employed over 12,000 people across 94 stores nationwide. And then came the golden years. Picture a Saturday morning in 1975. Dad has parked the Austin Maxi in the multi-story. Mum has the shopping list folded in her handbag. The children are already thinking about the cafe. You push through the heavy glass doors into the warm embrace of British home stores. The Muzak is playing something forgettable overhead. Shop assistants in matching tabards are folding jumpers with practiced precision. The lighting department glows at the far end of the store like a separate universe. This was the ritual. For millions of British families, this was how Saturdays worked. You came here for school uniforms in August, blazers in navy blue, white shirts in packs of 3, grey trousers that would survive a term of playground football, PE kits with elastic waistbands, sensible shoes that Mum would press her thumb against to check for a growing room. The fitting room curtains were scratchy brown fabric. The mirrors were unforgiving. But you left with everything you needed for September and enough change for egg and chips in the cafe. The lighting department deserves its own monument. Couples setting up their first home together would spend hours under those chandeliers. Crystal, brass, frosted glass, Tiffany-style shades in amber and green. If you were furnishing a house in Britain during the 1970s and 80s, you went to BHS for your lights. This was not negotiable. This was simply what people did. Your parents probably still have one hanging in the spare bedroom. A brass pendant with fluted glass shades. A 5-arm chandelier bought before you were born and never replaced because why would you? It still works. It still looks right. The cafe was the heart of everything. Formica tables wiped clean between customers, orange plastic chairs bolted to the floor, laminated menus offering the kind of food that nobody cooks anymore. Egg, ham and chips, beans on toast, a full English breakfast for under £2. The tea came in thick institutional cups and tasted like comfort. 3 generations could sit there together. Gran with her shopping bags, Mum resting her feet, children swinging their legs and counting down the minutes until pudding, tinned fruit and ice cream, rice pudding with a blob of jam. This was not fine dining. This was something better. This ordinary life was made slightly special. Homeware filled entire floors, towels in coordinating colors, bedding sets with matching valances, net curtains by the yard, kettles and toasters that would outlast marriages. Everything a young couple needed to set up a house without having to pretend they were richer than they were. BHS understood its customers. Decent working people who wanted nice things at fair prices. No judgment. No snobbery. Just solid, reliable goods that did the job. By 1980, the accountant magazine called British Home Stores strong and efficient. Earnings growth compared favorably to market leaders. Behind the scenes, the company was praised for its distribution systems and data processing. Everything was running smoothly. Everything seemed set to continue forever. But something was changing. Some observers noticed that compared to Marks & Spencer, the stores looked a bit drab, a bit dowdy. The word kept appearing in reports. Dowdy. It was the first crack in the foundation. In 1986, BHS merged with Habitat and Mothercare to form Storehouse. The suits in the boardroom thought this was progress. Terence Conran, the designer behind Habitat, was brought in to modernize the brand. The name British Home Stores was shortened to BHS, with a new logo featuring a lowercase swooping letter H. The 56 cafeterias were closed, gone, just like that. The executives wanted the stores to feel younger, more fashionable, more appealing to affluent shoppers who might otherwise walk past. It was a disaster. By the end of the decade, Forbes magazine was calling the revamp catastrophic. The attempt to attract young upper-class customers had achieved precisely one thing. It had driven away the loyal core shoppers who had loved BHS for decades. Mature, budget-conscious families walked in and did not recognize their shop anymore. The clothes were wrong. The atmosphere was wrong. Everything felt like it was trying too hard to be something it was not. A BHS executive named Helena Packshaw summed it up perfectly in 1994. Customers knew BHS had changed in the late 80s, but they did not know what we had become. Neither did we. By the late 1990s, the stores were described openly as cheap and dowdy. Not charmingly old-fashioned, not reliably traditional, just tired, left behind, struggling to find a purpose in a world of Next and New Look and Primark and Zara. Then Philip Green arrived. In May 2000, the retail tycoon bought BHS for £200 million. He took the company private, removed it from the stock exchange, and for a while things seemed to improve. Pre-tax profits rose in the first year. Green was hailed as a turnaround specialist, the king of the high street. But here is what was really happening. When Green bought BHS, the company pension fund was in surplus, £43 million of healthy reserves. By 2006, that same pension fund was in deficit. By 2012, the deficit had reached £232 million. Meanwhile, between 2002 and 2004, the Green family extracted over £422 million in dividends. In 2005, Tina Green received a dividend of £1.2 billion, the largest corporate dividend in British history. Paid to Monaco, tax-free. The stores grew shabbier. Investment dried up. Staff watched as maintenance requests went unanswered, and fixtures aged without replacement. Green had no interest in building something. He was extracting value from a company built over 7 decades by people who cared about British families. The pension fund that workers had paid into for their entire careers was being hollowed out while super yachts were being ordered in Monaco. In March 2015, Green sold BHS for £1. The buyer was Dominic Chappell, a man who had been declared bankrupt 3 times, a man with zero retail experience. A former racing driver whose previous business ventures had collapsed in failure, Green knew exactly what he was selling and exactly who he was selling it to. The pension deficit by then stood at over £500 million. 13 months later, BHS entered administration, 25 April 2016. debts totaling £1.3 billion, a pension black hole of £571 million, 11,000 jobs at immediate risk, 22,000 pensioners facing reduced retirement income. No buyer could be found. The shelves were stripped. The closing down sales began. Janet Scott was 61 years old. She had worked at the BHS store in York for almost 20 years. On the final day, she stood on the empty shop floor and wiped tears from her eyes. "I have seen children growing up," she said, "from tiny to getting their last school uniform." Genevieve Belcher was 60 in Lincoln. 24 years of service. Staff hugged each other, surrounded by empty rails and bare fixtures. One elderly customer, aged 84, had been coming to the store so regularly that staff knew his routine. He would sit in a comfortable chair by the fitting rooms and nap for 20 minutes before continuing his day. After the doors closed for good, he was seen peering through the windows, confused, lost. Letters arrived from loyal customers, thank you notes and chocolates. An 84-year-old woman wrote to tell the staff she would miss them. This was not just a shop closing. This was a community dying. Connections built over decades, severed in weeks. Parliament launched an inquiry. The resulting report used language rarely seen in official documents. Leadership failures and personal greed led to the collapse of BHS. Sir Philip Green was described as having left the business on life support after systematic plunder. One member of Parliament put it bluntly. He took the rings from the company fingers, beat it black and blue, starved it of food and water. Then he wanted credit for keeping it alive. The House of Commons voted to strip Green of his knighthood. 100 members of Parliament supported the motion. It was the first time in history that Parliament had proposed such action. In the end, he kept the title. In 2017, after intense pressure, Green finally paid £363 million towards the pension deficit. Too little, too late. The damage was done. On 28 August 2016, the final 22 BHS stores closed their doors. 88 years of British retail history ended not with dignity, but with clearance sales and redundancy notices. Staff posed for final photographs. Shutters came down on high streets from Swansea to York. The spaces left behind were filled by Primarks and Poundlands and Pure Gyms. Some remain empty to this day. Hollow units with faded signage and weathered to-let boards. Today, one single BHS store remains open. In Qatar, the brand survives online, selling lighting products under license. The Tammy Girl label was relaunched in 2022 on ASOS. Nostalgia repackaged for a generation who never knew the original. Former BHS sites across Britain tell their own stories. The Gravesend store stood empty for years before becoming a furniture shop that also failed. The Canterbury store remains vacant behind hoardings. The Ashford store sits silent in a shopping centre, searching for new purpose. Philip Green watched his entire empire crumble. Arcadia Group entered administration in November 2020. Topshop, Dorothy Perkins, Burton, Miss Selfridge, all gone from British high streets. The King of the High Street became a cautionary tale about what happens when corporate greed is allowed to run unchecked. But here is what hurts most. BHS was not just a shop. It was where British families learned how to want, how to choose, how to belong. It was Saturday mornings and school uniform fittings and first chandeliers for first homes. It was 3 generations sharing chips in the cafe while shopping bags piled around their feet. It was ordinary life, made special by the simple act of being together. Somewhere in a charity shop, a BHS chandelier still hangs. Crystal droplets catching the light the same way they did 40 years ago when a young couple chose it together and imagined the home they would build. Somewhere in a drawer, a cardigan with a Prover label has outlasted the company that made it. The lights went out on British home stores, but the memories remain. Do you remember shopping at BHS when it actually meant something? Tell me about your Saturday trips and your cafe meals and your school uniforms in the comments below. If this story brought back memories, hit that subscribe button for more tales of the Britain we remember. Until next time, take care of each other.